Well, good evening, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives, and tonight we're going to be joined by George Webb and Professor Hamamoto. And before I get this show started, I just wanted to say thank you, everybody, for everything that you do to support the show. Professor Hamamoto and George and Andy DeBala and Aaron Adler up at Neighborhood News Studio. Well, I guess you're down in Florida with George now, too. But as you can tell, I got my 4-pack of Bruce Koss ginger beer in hand, and tomorrow I'm hitting the road. So I'm ready. As you can tell, I'm dressed for the occasion and just ready to go. So thanks, everybody. I'm going to take a week off beginning tomorrow. And so with that introduction, which makes me smile, I'll bring our guests in, not guests, our regulars, George Webb and Professor Hamamoto. Hi, guys.
How you doing, John? Thank you for having us on again.
Yeah, we're down here in Venice Beach, and we've got about 6 people here. We have the famous ECAT. For all those who don't know ECAT, there she is. Hi,
Hello,
ECAT.
Kat.
So
Great.
she has some graphics that we'll use later, but I don't want to ruin the surprise. So continue on.
Professor, how are
John.
you?
John, I'm fine, and I hope you have a really nice vacation. It's well deserved. You're the hardest working man I know, besides George Webb, of course, or equal to George Webb. 6 days a week, sometimes a couple shows. So
Well,
I hope you have a good time.
thanks. I took a number of my daytime shows off this week to keep organizing and getting ready. I am getting ready for the big write. It's going to be a big book write. Everybody's behind me on this, and I'm going to do it. And I'm just going to get away with my wife for a week, and then hit the ground running when I get back.
Excellent. Sounds like a great plan.
I would just say, if you're going to be with your significant other, John, knowing your significant other and how wonderful she is, just get up early. That's how I do it. I get up at 2 a.m. and then from 2 a.m. to about 7,
Yeah.
magic time to write.
Okay. Well, I usually do wake up about 4 nowadays, so that'll work. Professor Hamamoto, how about you? You had a show today, and I started to watch a little bit of it, but then I had to leave. But what's been going on with you?
Yes, well, in addition to the show, I've been looking at some notes, and I think it's about time for me to start putting a book or two out. And I wanted to ask George if his new printer has the ability to do smaller format type books. This is just for comparison. Yours is this format, and this is an Oxford sort of. It fits in a backpack nicely, and it's very well done. It's good quality. I don't know. It's about 3.5 by 5, but this is what I'm looking for here. Just a small. This is called the, by the way, very short introductions published by Oxford University Press, and they have dozens of just sort of capsule by experts summaries of any number of topics. This one's on the Habsburg Empire. This is on the history of cinema. This is German literature, and this one's on the Marquis de Sade. So anyway, this is what I'm looking for, John. Something, and also with a uniform artwork. The aesthetics is really important, and I just wanted to compliment George Webb for his the growing artistic flair of your books. This is already great with Lee Harvey Oswald. This photo, and this one here of Ron Fossier. This takes the cake. If you open it up like this, you see a cryptid. He's half human and half reptile.
Wow.
That's what we call a cryptid. There it is. Yeah. I got mine. I'm sure ECAT has hers. She probably has it signed, so I'm jealous.
It looks a bit reptilian, I'm afraid.
Yeah, well, he's a reptile, so that works well. He's one of those guys who wants to make AIDS an aerosol. It's in a convenient spray. It was a deadly pathogen before you know it, and now we'll make it in a convenient spray at the Erasmus lab.
Yes, I get all my miasmas in Erasmus.
There you go, John. No one turns a phrase like you. And, I look at this stack of books here, and I've just seen these for the first time in print. And they're really quite beautiful. And I agree with you that the cover art is so important. We'll print that in a heavier stock paper because we're getting shut down. I've had like 7 books now shut down on Amazon. And so we've got our own binder. We got our own beautiful high quality image printer with the Epson inkjet printer. So we're going to go for the top quality. And we want to also couple this with people coming back to Michigan in the summer and meeting their favorite author, and then printing a whole collected works, sort of like a Shakespeare collected works, and also hardbound, so that the author can sign. Dan Hopsiker has one kind of collected works where he sells for $100 donation. Dan Hopsiker was here earlier today. And so we took that idea of the collected works and said, wow, wouldn't that be great to get all of Dr. Hamamoto's collected works, or Chris Milligan, any of the authors that are out there at Trine Day.
Great idea. George, I admire your entrepreneurial zeal. It's
So
born
do
of necessity, but man, you are a hustler.
It is a necessity. When they shut down your books, 2 of my best-selling books, well, it's happened to me 5 times now, 6 times. One, Minutes to Midnight, was a bestseller. I got knocked down. The 2, this book about task force going to the Army. The Army now, we said the Army had a secret vaccine before the launch of this bioweapon. That the Army had its own private vaccine and didn't share it with the President of the United States. Did not share it with the community at large. Let almost 1 million people die now and not admit that they have their own secret vaccine. Yesterday, finally, the U.S. Army came out and said exactly where we said, exactly where Task Force said, at Fort Belvoir, there is indeed a secret coronavirus vaccine. And it's called nanoferritin. We had talked about, Task Force had talked about nanosilver as something that the Soviets had used to protect themselves against SARS, MERS, and SARS-2. Total vindication. And on the same day, we had vindication with the start date of coronavirus, mid-October. And that was by the the Academy of Sciences. The National Academy of Sciences came out and fixed the start date exactly when we said the super spreader event happened at Wuhan NATO military CISM games. So it's been a great 2 days. That's all I can say. It's really been fun.
Absolutely, and that's captured in the you call them the end notes here, but it's a recapitulation of your previous work. It's so timely. So, George, what do you think forced the hand of the officials to admit that there's this lab? Do you think it might be due to your reportage?
Well, I think it's kind of like the little kid with the finger in the dike. Not to hit on a Russian, a Dutch fable.
Erasmus,
yes. but it is kind of one of those things. If a little leak springs, a large leak will spring if you don't plug it up with a cover story. And if somebody's out there saying that Redfield knew that there was a vaccine and he didn't share it with the world, and he sent the athletes to Wuhan knowing they were sick, that's not good, because that means that the foreign minister was right. It did come from the American athletes, right? And now it looks like we had the bioweapon, we had the sword, we had the shield, and we put the sword out there. That doesn't look good on the world stage. And so
No.
I think what happened is they said, well, we just came up with it because this whistleblower at Fort Detrick was very involved with the current WHO director, Tedros, in this little province of Tigray in Ethiopia. And if he actually was going to blow the whistle that there was, that they were spraying the rebels and giving the rebels the vaccine, and they were spraying everyone else in the corridor, that I mean, how much longer can you keep a secret? You have to kind of do a limited hangout at some point. And I think they just didn't want to get caught with that. There it is. That's the article saying that they have the
Okay.
excellent work, Andy. That's the article saying that
Yeah.
they have their own private secret vaccine. Now that 1 million people died and they never said a word until just yesterday.
How do we know that they've had that for a year, George? I don't see that in the headline, for instance.
That's what's been covered up. And that's what I allege, that it's been actually 20 years that we've had a universal vaccine. And it was a nanoparticle, which was nanosilver, which was improved to nanoferritin. And it was for SARS, it was for MERS and SARS-2, which is COVID-19. So that's what I'm saying. It's a limited hang-up. They're acting like they just invented this. But remember, if they would have come forward with this and said, oh, by the way, we actually have been using this as a bioweapon prophylactic for 20 years, they would look pretty bad, letting 1 million people die. And we would have never triggered trillions of dollars in the Congress to do emergency vaccines if we knew the Army already had a private stash. So they needed to repress that. And so it's not in the article. We obviously alleged it in this book that got banned. This was task force's work. And we'll see what happens. I think there's going to be more whistleblowers. You can't shoot every whistleblower. And we'll see what happens.
Can I ask just a quick question? Because I think this is a really important distinction. We think of things like nano or silver, and more commonly zinc or magnesium or something as a prophylactic or something to take in case that you got it, that it will fight it and get rid of it before it invests into your lungs. And that's, basically what I thought that the nano silver would be too. But you're describing this Army vaccine as if it were a kind of a nano silver product. Does that mean that it does not get into your mRNA and affect changes like the other ones that are more commercially advertised?
This is known as a subunit vaccine. So the way it works is, if this is the spike protein in SARS, MERS, or SARS-2, COVID, okay? That's the whole genome, and the thing that codes, well, I'll just say my fingers here are the genetic code that code for the full fist, okay? That's the full unit. A subunit vaccine is something that takes one element out to make it competitive with the vaccine, but renders it dysfunctional as far as the pathogenic effects. So sort of a placebo. So your body will raise the immunity that will fight the full fist, right? But you don't have the deleterious effects of the full punch. You basically are using a decoy or whatever for your body to get you prepared for the real punch, right? It's sort of like sparring. So that's a subunit, and that's how the vaccine works for. That's currently how the vaccine works for Pfizer. The thing you're talking about, John, is actually where I send a DNA messenger into the host DNA, the target DNA, and I actually alter the DNA. And that is not the case here. So the problem, though, with subunits is you have to keep it very cold. It breaks down quickly. So the Pfizer has to be flown at sub-zero temperatures, at very cold temperatures with liquid nitrogen. It has to get there really super quickly. There's a lot of handling issues with the Pfizer vaccine. So ferritin is actually a way of tricking a bacteria to make the vaccine for you. And it's ferritin is basically makes you a kind of a model of the spike protein so that your body will raise the antibodies without the bad effects. So if that makes sense, it's sort of like you don't have to get punched out by Muhammad Ali. You just have to learn what a jab is so that you can defend against the jab when you do get the big punch. And that's pretty important because it saves your life. And like I said, 1 million people have died, or 800,000 to 1 million people have died. And now this is just coming out. So Andy's playing an mRNA vaccine there, and we could take it from there.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I understood that there is a distinction there, and there that much I understood, and I'm amazed at how much you can say and explain, and I appreciate that very much. Thank you, George.
Now, George, in your current book here, Sprayed in Dutch, this information here, does this not reinforce this, or at least expand on this revelation by the U.S. Army? The timeline you draw here is the relationship with this scientist, Zheng Li, otherwise known as Bat Lady, who has been working with Peter Daszak for at least 15 years in on a similar virus in the caves of Yunnan province.
Yeah, so there was this case of these miners dying in 2012, the Mojiang, I think it's pronounced, miners, and they died from this thing called, there it is, this thing called Rat G13 is the strain, and it bore an incredible similarity. It's matched to COVID-19. And you have all these experts out there like Peter Daszak of EcoHealth Alliance and the Ron Faucier, who has the reptile face, for Erasmus Lab, saying, "Oh, these things, they change so quickly. You know, they can change 20% in a month. It's very fast, rapid changes." Well, when you find out something that's such a close match, 1,000 miles away in a bat cave, and supposedly the bats flew 1,000 miles to the Wuhan lab. They were smart. They knew to go to the weapons lab, right? And they knew to go to the fish market, even though they don't sell those bats at the fish market, right? It became obvious that the Zheng Li, the bat lady, was sending teams out and taking these things out of the wild and then what they call passaging them to make them more of or less sometimes of a bioweapon. So there's an artificiality here in this serial passaging. And it's so close, right, to the one discovered 9 years ago that everyone's saying bioweapon, bioweapon, bioweapon. This is a signature of serial passaging in a lab, not natural genetic drift that would happen over 9 years. And it just so happens it shows up right at ground zero, right where the international outbreak occurs, right at the same time that we have the international super spreader event with the NATO World Games. So it's looking like a bioweapon. It walks like a bioweapon. It talks like a bioweapon. It's probably a bioweapon.
Good job, George. My gosh.
Yeah, it's just too horrible, really, to think about. And but George has got the presence of mind to put it together and explain it. And not in the tone of some excited news person that's trying to sell the story. Saw a meme today that said, if there's a pandemic, you don't need to use propaganda to tell people there's a pandemic. They know there's a pandemic. There's people dying all around them. That's a pandemic. And the fact that they've used so much of these, I mean, it's just very indicative of the whole thing being a military operation, as George has indicated.
And also by talking about this and talking about the connections of these people in a business sense, the fact that they have been collaborators and the fact that there have been studies published by these people talking about these strains, forces them to come forward and admit the connections. So, for instance, Peter Daszak, and not until we did the connection to 2012, he never said anything about him being a collaborator with Zheng Li at the Wuhan lab. But now he's admitting freely in this last. He was a World Health Organization investigator going there and trying to find the source of the coronavirus. It's sort of like asking the fox the next day after the chicken coop's cleaned out, find who ate the chickens. But he finally admitted, well, it turns out, yes, I've been a 15-year collaborator with Zheng Li at that lab. And we've been passaging stuff for 15 years. It turns out that he's been a 15-year collaborator with the guy who is the reptile man on the front of the Erasmus Lab book. Ron Fauchier, who is the deputy of Marion Koopmans. She's the one who also is going to Wuhan to try to find out what fox ate the chickens. It's sending in the foxes to find out who ate the chickens the next day. And they've all got little feathers in their mouth as they're reporting out that, yes, they've had 15-year relationships with Zheng Li. And she freely admits that she's gone out and got these bat viruses from these places, and freely admits that she's been passaging this stuff in her lab. So I'm not coming up with a conspiracy theory that says this is happening. This is actually their own individuals in the cabal testifying that these are all of our co-conspirators, and they're all saying the same thing.
What you got here, Andy?
Scott Pelley. Is that Scott Pelley?
Yeah, 2004, it says. The Virus Hunters.
Yeah, and I think he did a piece on this. Is interesting because Scott Pelley, it kind of explains why he went after me so viciously.
Oh, you got to turn up the volume, Andy. I'd like to hear him.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. I think this is about the Erasmus Lab. Go ahead, Andy.
Look at that spiky cryptid.
Yeah, that looks like a picture that I remember from my childhood of the story called Pandora's Box.
Full of that, then the search for the origin of Nipah, a bug so lethal they had to build a prison to hold it.
Or was that dramatic or what?
Prison is a sophisticated biocontainment lab in northern Malaysia. The Malaysians never had one of these labs before, but they had. And Dr. Peter Daszak are virus hunters, traveling the remote corners of the earth for the Consortium for Conservation Medicine. That's a partnership of schools, including Harvard, Tufts, and Johns Hopkins, along with the U.S. Wildlife Health Center and the Wildlife Trust. It's an American program looking for viruses on the far side of the planet.
What do you say to somebody who's watching this interview and they're saying to themselves, look, I'm not a pig farmer in Malaysia.
Sure.
Why should I worry?
We never had monkeypox in America. We don't even have monkeys in America. Okay, how do these diseases pass into a place that seems to be completely unrelated? With the increase in global travel, with the increase in trade, with the increase in human activities all over the world's becoming a very small place. So just because there may not be Nipah virus in America right now doesn't mean that a similar virus can't emerge there, or that other unknown diseases can't pass from wildlife into people in America.
And they're exploring places like this because most new viruses infecting man are coming from the wild.
No, in fact, almost 75% of the emerging diseases in humans actually come from animals, wildlife or domestic animals. So normally you need to go to those wildlife species and look for the virus there.
They've come to look at Tiaman Island because they suspect that they will find the animal that first carried Nipah, the original source of the virus. Daszak told us that if this kind of work was done decades ago, it might have changed the history of AIDS.
With HIV, we're looking at a virus that emerged from chimpanzees in Africa sometime in the last century. That virus emerged into one single person hunting chimpanzees. It was a single person event. Wouldn't it be amazing to go back there in time and to see that virus actually emerge and say, hey, wait a minute, don't butcher that animal. You're going to have a virus that then goes on to kill 40 million people.
God.
And that's
Andy,
what you're
I
hoping
got
to
to stop
prevent.
this for some
Exactly.
point. I want to hear what
We're
George and Daryl have to say about that. That is some amazing footage.
Great job, Andy, for airing that. I wanted to see what this guy was like and how he speaks.
Yeah, well, that's the Peter Daszak that's in the book. It's in both of my new books, how the virus got to China, my latest book, and also Data's Little Shop of Viruses, and also he's mentioned in Spray It in Dutch as well. Yeah, and the truth is that they don't ever think you're going to learn what serial passaging is, and serial passaging is what I said it was. I can have 100 animals in cages, and it can be everything in the panoply between the host animal, where I'm getting the virus, to humans. And I can work on every step of the way. Think of it like a staircase, and it's a 100-step staircase. I can work all day with 1,000 animals to get from step one to step 2, and then I go to step 3, then I go to step 4, and then I eventually, Ed Haslam talks about this with SV40, with the monkey virus getting to humans. It's a much better chance of doing that through selective breeding, just like you were trying to go from a wolf to a border collie through selective breeding, rather than, just sitting back and letting evolution take a wolf to a border collie, right? It's selective breeding. You do the same sort of selection in a lab. Now with these CRISPR machines, where we actually have identifiable tracing from the genetic code to the protein, it's much easier to do. But that border collies do exist, and they were created from wolves, right? And they didn't know anything about DNA. So you can speed up evolution. And I hope you show a picture of the border collie. And yeah, this is serial passaging right here. It just basically means select for where you want the passaging to go. Okay. And you just keep selecting, taking the stuff off the top. If you want to select for really tall folks, it's sort of like you have 1,000 kids and select for everybody who's 6'8" and above. And those other cells die in the petri dish, right? And then you end up with 6'8" guys. And then the 6'8" guys all, marry 6-foot girls. And then you see what you end up with. And you're going to get a taller race very quickly by selection, rather than just saying, well, let's just, play the dice, let nature roll the dice. That's the big lie here. That's the big lie they're not telling you about what they're doing with these viruses. The international community, this isn't George Webb in condemning the Erasmus Lab. The international science community has condemned the Erasmus Lab for this gain of function. This is called gain of function. When you aerosolize AIDS, that's gain of function. When you aerosolize Ebola, that's gain of function. When you aerosolize these deadly pathogenic avian flus like H5N1, which they did, their research was stopped by Obama. And there was a 4-year moratorium put on their research. Not me. This is before I ever got involved, right? For some reason, in March 2019, they lifted the moratorium on this insane gain-of-function research. And I reproduce all this in line in my articles of all this international condemnation and condemnation politically, right? And that's how we get to where we are today. Myanmar, if you remember, is on the Belt and Road. And there was a key pipeline to get oil to China from the Pakistani oil refineries, where they don't have to go around the Straits of Malacca and that whole Malay Peninsula anymore to get to China. And again, this bears that signature of, it always seems to be these pathogenic viruses end up where the pipelines are going in. It always seems to be a gas pipeline or an oil pipeline, and then all of a sudden we have an outbreak because somebody ate a monkey in Singapore. No, they sprayed something that they've been passaging serially for hundreds of thousands of experiments. And that's how we get the virus. And that's the truth. And that's the big lie they're not telling you.
And this is to clear the Belt and Road. This is for the energy capture goal, end game, right? To capture all those natural gas and oil resources in those regions.
Yeah, and the same thing is true in Ethiopia, where they're trying to build a back pipeline. They partitioned South Sudan, so Kofor Black and all of his Burisma friends, Jim Woolsey and so forth, the Genie Energy kids, could get a hold of the oil riches of South Sudan, and they have to go through North Sudan to go to Port Sudan to get the oil to the Red Sea. Well, guess what? Let's just build a backdoor corridor through Somalia and Ethiopia, Eritrea and Djibouti, and the world's our oyster. We can now get out to I don't know if that's the Gulf of Aden or whatever, but we get away from that bottleneck there at the Gulf of, at the bottom of the Red Sea. So.
And that draws a straight line geopolitically to the Netherlands and such characters as the Queen of Netherlands. Her family name is Zorregieta, and her official royal name is Queen Maxima. Is that where you're going? Royal Dutch Shell oil?
Absolutely. Queen Beatrice, who is the mother of Prince Willem, was one of the major shareholders in Royal Dutch Shell. Henry Kissinger used her as a straw owner of his Royal Dutch Shell ownership. Prince Willem used her as the owner. When he became king and she abdicated, he inherited all her Royal Dutch shares. And Kissinger's best buddy, Zori Gutayega, sprayed bioweapons in Argentina with reckless abandon, killing thousands. Argentina became a spray test center. Now, Queen Maxima, she was only in grade school when her father was doing all these war crimes with Henry Kissinger. But Henry Kissinger is the one who introduced that beautiful woman to Prince Willem and arranged this marriage. And I feel horrible for Princess Maxima. Bring up her picture, Andy. Everyone will see she's, every bit the Oconus lure that you would want in a princess and a queen. And she is the special representative to Gutierrez at the UN, right? She's done several missions to China, 4 or 5 missions to China with Chairman Xi. Her special assistant is the head of the Erasmus Lab, Marion Koopmans. This is the back channel. This is the Kissinger dark weapons back channel to coronavirus, to China, for helping develop and test the series of bioweapons, starting with SARS, then MERS, and then SARS-2.
That's amazing reporting, George. Thank you for that.
And I doubt she knows that.
And you doubt she knows it?
Yeah, I mean, I think she's talking about kids and the poor kids, and she is a fighter for poverty all over the world. And I don't want to take anything away from Queen Maxima, but when these diplomatic missions go to China, there are all these guys. There's Prince Willem in the middle. He lived right across the hall from Henry Kissinger on 72nd Street, and he went to a lot of the board meetings of Kissinger and Associates with David Petraeus and KKNR, all there. And it's the people in the back that you don't see in these publicity shots that are doing these deals with the Erasmus Lab joint development. Remember what Marion Koopman says about the source of the coronavirus. She goes there and studies with an elite blue ribbon team, for a month. And you know what she says at the end? Well, it's not just the fish market. It's not just the fish market. You studied, you brought all the best minds in the world and studied this for a month. And your comment is it's not, the fish market isn't the whole story. That's a true story. That's her reporting.
Is that what happens when you send the foxes to investigate the murders in the chicken house?
They say they need probably 6 to 7 years to figure out the true source. When we'll all forget this, right? And I'm not going to forget this, and I'm going to write about it. And no matter how much they ban the books, we're going to do our own press. We're going to print Dr. Hamamoto's books. Those Oxford books, those handbooks are so great. And Peter Duke showed me a whole bunch of these. Yeah, and it's kind of like EIR reports from Harley Schlanger and those LaRouche folks in one little book that you can carry and kind of read at the beach, which is kind of cool.
I'll be interviewing some more LaRouche folks as we get back in second half of April. On April the 23rd, we'll have Dennis Speed, a longtime LaRouche supporter, and he's the chairman of a number of their committees. He's always hosting their Saturday afternoon seminars, and a man who's been involved in the truth movement with LaRouche Gang for I think at least 40 years. I look forward to talking to him and learning more about him. And then on the 30th of April, we'll have Diane Sear, and she is running for Senate against Chuck Schumer on an independent ticket. I wish her luck. She is also a musician, and I got to talk to her some today. And I've become very impressed with the musical work of the Schiller Institute in New York City. They have a fantastic choir and orchestra, and you can see them on Facebook. They really do some great music.
John, I wonder, this is a question I always had. I was never to EIR. It was always very expensive. So I'd always get the later editions that were posted there. But the question that I always had about them is that did they manage to get so far upstream and ahead of the pack and just really breaking down how these operations function? They're like years ahead, and only now really is the general public beginning to catch up with it. But I remember these books from years ago that they were detailing it quite in depth, this whole system that we're talking about at this very moment. Now, George brings in the specificity and the details, the timeline, but conceptually, they had it down. EIR.
Yeah, their work is consistently great, and you think you've just discovered something about one of these deep state characters. Well, just go to LaRouchePub.com and put that name in the index there, and you'll find that you probably don't know nearly as much as they do about that character. It's really quite a great resource. So, yeah. But the only answer that I think any of them would give you is that they had Lyndon LaRouche, who was just one of the geniuses that walks the earth from time to time. He really was an amazing man in many ways, not only as far as philosophy and politics, but economics and the mathematics behind it. Also, a lot. He was very good at physics, and he was I'm told, a concert level pianist as well. So one of those people that can just carry the ball for a lot of us. And I think in our time we have the benefit of our own very special person, and that George Webb is here with us tonight.
Well, there you go.
George Webb is the Jonathan Swift of our age.
There you go, Jonathan.
Yeah,
Swift, that's a great.
He really is.
I liked how he did short books, and so Thomas Paine did it as well. You don't have to fill up and use a lot of ink to get your point across. And, if you had your druthers of somebody who was going to tell you how to fix your laser printer, would you want somebody who's used a lot of pictures and didn't use a lot of words and got you back up and running quickly? Or would you buy the book that was 700 pages with no pictures and illustrations? So I look at it very much like LaRouche did. All my professors in college were LaRouche. It's very functional how you look at things. It's very mechanical. And, just like, hey, we got to go from point A to point B. How do we get there? Well, we can cut down a tree, or we can, build a log mill, or we can all theorize it and assume we had a bridge. If you're an economist, let's just assume we had a bridge, No, that's not very practical. So that's what I do like about the LaRouche, practicality. And I think the other thing, the reason why LaRouche had so many insights was because he really pushed they pushed people to the embassies. They would always do outreach to the embassies, and that is where you get your information. They're doing a lot of great work right now in China, on the Belt and Road, and they're right there on the ground, which is where you got to be when not in their grandmother's basement, which I give them a lot of credit right now.
It's surprising because they don't have a huge footprint in American media at all, but they do have quite a reach and a lot of depth in countries all around the world. It's pretty encouraging to realize that they really do have quite a following in an international sense, and that means that we can, if we have the opportunity, we can bring them into the discussion here, which I'm trying to do because I think their voice is essential.
Now, speaking of international relations and geopolitics, George, I'd like your response to this. This is what I think the only way we're going to be able to avert disaster and to escape the lockdown is for international power players to put pressure on the United States of America to let our people go. And the only nation that's in the position to do that, that has moral authority as well as geopolitical strength to back it up, is the People's Republic of China. if your report gets to them, as it will eventually, very soon, it's still very new, especially this admission by the U.S. Army that they've been complicit in this. China has nothing left to do but to say, we demand of the United States of America at the level of United Nations to account for their doing there, and we're going to hold you accountable. Now, won't that be ironic if the Chacoms rescue the American people? And now I think I understand why within supposedly independent media, there's just been so much spleen directed towards the Chacoms and just the total denigration of them as international player. It doesn't really make any sense. Now it does, but it didn't make any sense. These, ironically, they're going to be our allies. I'm talking about the American people, not Peter Daszak, not the lizard people, the human beings, not the reptoids, not the cryptids, the human beings. Those are the people that are going to assist us, just as the United States of America assisted the Chinese people since the beginning of the early 19th century, beginning with missionaries. And I know in the literature, it's always being portrayed as that they're over there to Christianize them and exploit them and make way for the Rockefellers. Part of that is true. But in terms of war, like the Pacific War, the Chinese Revolution, the founding of the Chinese Republic, Sun Yat-sen was in Hawaii when the revolution broke out and created the Republic of China. So I think China owes us a return favor at long last, and just in the nick of time, but with solid, grounded research and reportage by George Webb.
Well,
Thank you very much again.
It's funny because we were just talking 2 minutes ago, Eddie Eds and I, about refilming the scene over in Hawaii of Sun Yat-sen on the beach, listening to his transistor radio. We're going to do the servitors of empire and just say, hey, we're doing really great. The team's doing really great. We're winning in the 9th inning, and he's sitting there, supposedly the leader. I'm not kidding. I'm kidding. Eddie's sitting here. He wasn't really going to be the guy we put in there. But, it just those little factoids, you can just see that word picture of him listening to he's on the beach with a little umbrella and he's listening to how the team is doing. Sun Yat-sen's not leading any revolution on the beach in Hawaii, in Maui, right? He's a foreign plant. He's a servitor that's being flown in after the people do the real work, right? So it just so happens, Doctor, that's right out of Servitors of Empire. If you haven't gotten it, run out into the night and buy it. But using the Chinese, we already did that. I mean, we already got the Chinese Foreign Ministry to say that this U.S. Army group had a vaccine, and the people that came over in the contingent, especially the State Department contingent within the U.S. military athletes, had raised the antibody for coronavirus 19. Okay. And we didn't create that story. That story came from the Chinese Foreign Ministry. We just did the digging. We leveraged off them and found out the Armed Diplomatic Services people that were there. And the Armed Diplomatic Services people aren't the key players, right? They're a telltale that there was this diplomatic contingent, an emergency rescue contingent that went to the super spreader event. It could have been worse. It might not have been the rescue mission. It might have been something worse. So they came at me for saying, here's a telltale, and giving that back to the Chinese Foreign Ministry. The Chinese Foreign Ministry is the one who ran it up the flagpole and said it was true. Right? The reason why the video that we did that went to 650,000 views in 3 hours, it wasn't because of, the Potomac group, coming up with a conclusion. It was the Potomac group singling out the diplomatic contingent. And then they said, yes, you're right. It is within the diplomatic contingent. Scott Pelley's of the world are the ones that distorted it and said it was just somebody who was gunning for someone, right? This was a U.S. State Department employee, and that is a telltale of a diplomatic contingent. That is a telltale for Kissinger. This person worked directly for the NATO Supreme Allied Commander. That's a telltale for the Supreme Allied Commander. That's a proxy. So we don't have all the answers yet, but we did lay it out on the table in March of 2020, and it's gonna crack the case.
Well, now there's an admission by the U.S. Army that indeed there was work going on. That's what China was looking for. So, what's the next stage, George? Is there going to be like an international stalemate here, really power politics between China and the U.S.?
No. I agree with you. There's going to be a blue ribbon committee established internationally to get to the bottom of this. The WHO has been defamed because all the people who let the dogs out are the ones that are now looking for the dogs, right? People do want to get to the bottom of this. How did this happen? And they don't want to be a nuclear winter anymore. We were the one, our group, John and all the Ospreys, and then, Kat here and everybody, they're the ones who found out that Fauci had all the patents at the precursors of SARS in 2005, had all the patents in MERS. All the vaccine companies had to come through Fauci and Redfield and Birx and all those patents for GP 160. And then later on, they found GP 120. Dave Underdown did some amazing work. Everybody, all the folks that were there and found it. Hey, the benefactors of all this stuff of a worldwide outbreak are Fauci, Birx, and Redfield, right? They're the ones who don't want to accept responsibilities. They're the ones that are pointing the finger at the Wuhan lab. And the Erasmus partners are caught in the middle saying, don't blame, and Peter Daszak saying, it's heinous to blame the Wuhan lab. Heinous. And Koopman said it's extremely unlikely that anything leaked from the lab. Why do you think the Americans are pointing the finger, especially Redfield came out just 2 days ago, said that it's a leak from the lab with no evidence, right?
Mm-hmm.
The reason is because it was a bioweapons development program. It was SARS. It was MERS. It was MERS-2. That was what the Erasmus Lab was created for. It is a Frankenstein organization created by Henry Kissinger to move forward his bioweapons agenda. It's laid bare now for the people of the world to see. We're exposing it, and they have to do a limited hangout. They have to take the wind out of our sails because we're going to gain momentum. A small idea is like a lion. You let it out, and it defends itself. You don't need to protect it. The truth, you just let it go, and it will conquer the world. And they have to stop it. They either have to disrupt us, knock us down, or they have to come up with shills, fake saviors, or they've got to come out and do the Scott Pelley. The Scott Pelley thing didn't wash. The CNN thing didn't wash because the facts now are lining up. And the international community knows it. So we're in a very interesting position. I say an international Blue Ribbon Commission that is equivalent, European-based, equivalent to the WHO, but not WHO, is the next step.
George, under which auspices would the Blue Ribbon Commission be convened? Which country do you think Russia would be the logical choice for that?
Yeah, that would probably be the center of gravity choice. I think that would probably, I would like to see something a little bit more non-aligned. I don't know, in Europe, I think there's so much pressure for the partner states to be aligned that you would have to go to like the BRIC countries, Brazil, China, Russia, India, I don't know, it's hard to, I'm just thinking BRIC right off the top of my head, but maybe there's.
How about Slovenia?
Well, if Melania
as an honest broker, because we do have an inside track on that. We have a Slovenian American woman who was the first lady, or still is first lady.
I was going to say, if Melania put the call out, I'm sure.
I think this is the opportunity that I had been dreaming of or intuiting. If she initiates this or acts as the mediator, I think Slovenia would be the ideal honest broker for a Blue Ribbon Commission, an international Blue Ribbon Commission.
It turns out you can do a lot with just the metadata that's already out there and publish the scientific studies that are already out there. And all you have to do is win over the intelligentsia, win over the people that know what they're talking about and that are being presented like scientific studies. And then they start seeing the ridiculousness of these stories. Lee Harvey Fishmonger, Lee Harvey Lab Coat, This is like saying Lee Harvey Oswald fired 16,000 bullets in 5.6 seconds from 15,000 different locations, right? And people who know science are saying there's no way that there's going to be genetic drift 1,000 miles, and we're not going to have any evidence of it. There's going to be zero evidence between the caves in Wuhan and the caves in Yunnan and the Wuhan lab. It only flies. They only fly like airplanes. The viruses only fly like airplanes from remote caves that are doing gold mining and silver mining. Now, how does that get over there to the Wuhan lab?
1,000 miles away, was it?
Yeah, 1,000 miles. And Zhengli admits to going out there and passaging this stuff. And when she got the coronavirus, she said that our lab doesn't have the coronavirus 19. So it couldn't have escaped from our lab. But we had sequenced this rat G13, which is 96%. Now, you have to have a story of how it could be that close of a relative, 9 years ago out in a cave, and then how it got into, the food chain without affecting anything in between. Remember, if it was like, Geoffrey Chaucer and a missionary carrying the virus 1,000 miles, or bats flying, you would have intermediate outbreaks all along the way. You would have intermediate genomes all along the way. You wouldn't have time machine genomes that just, zap forward 9 years in a time machine. This is like H.G. Wells' time machine. And, this all of a sudden appears. Unless you secreted it from your collection in 2012, you put it in your lab, and then you passaged it for pathogenicity, right? For the time when you guys needed to lock down the world. And I'm submitting to the world right now. That happened in May of 2019. And it took down the Trump platform of economic success, and it turned it into crap. And the result was we're living in lockdown right now. Our nation's capital right now might go back to 11-foot fences and concertina wire after having 2 or 3 days with 8-foot black mesh fences.
It's incredible people accept it, and but it's the control of the media. I've been reading about World War II recently, and it's more and more apparent to me that these wars were facilitated by the media. These wars wouldn't have happened. Going back to William Randolph Hearst, who you were talking about the other day on your show, George, the power of that kind of money in a corporate environment, in an environment where it's just trying to make as much money as you can, and that terrible attitude of who cares, just as long as I win the money. That attitude of the media, it didn't stop with William Randolph Hearst. We got into World War I, and we've seen people talk about that. James Corbett covers it pretty well, and Jerry Doherty in his book. And we've also then, from the whole story that we've unraveled with the help of all the great authors that we've cited, to see that World War II was likewise facilitated by false propaganda being issued to the German people, to the American people, to the British people. It's all about propaganda. And here we are today with people just believing things that are said because the media says them, and for no other reason, because they haven't applied their reason, their human God-given ability to think seems to have been stopped. And that is also part of what's been going on in our world, is to like I was reminded a minute ago about Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, and the reason that they went out to ban all the books was because they didn't want people to be burdened by complicated thought processes. That if you read books, then you'll start thinking in complicated ways that we don't want you to think. So anyway, that's my 2 cents to wrap it up tonight. Somewhere under the lockdown, George.
Well, that's a banned book. It's a 451 book, and we're starting the banned bookstore in Michigan. It's going to be the Fahrenheit 450 bookstore, the last stop before 451, the temperature at which paper burns. So we're going to save these great authors like Dr. Hamamoto, and we're going to save their works. And if I get hit by a bus or not, doesn't matter. We have the historical record. And I love it because it just shows you how much you can outthink them. And we're going to Henry Kissinger's chessboard, man. We're not stopping at Scott Pelley's stop on the way here. We're going to Kissinger's chessboard. It's the Kissinger game. And oh, by the way, they said I was a conspiracy theorist because I said military organizations like NATO start wars and wage wars. And that was called conspiracy theory, that military organizations like, in World War II, start wars and wage wars. Okay. That's conspiracy theory.
Yeah, right.
Like the Empire of Japan, they Tora. It's like, well, that happened naturally. That was Lee Harvey Hamamoto, or I'm sorry, Yamamoto. One guy.
No relationship.
No, it wasn't one guy. It was a plan. You did some great work on him, though, Doctor. We'll get to it on another show, but just how the OSS was building up the war dreams.
Oh, sure. And the Bank of England.
Yeah. And financing them. And then all this, the other interesting thing, I just want to say this last thing, this 731, this Unit 731 stuff that Dr. Hamamoto's done with Yoichi Shimatsu, it's just gold. A lot of these new prion diseases where this guy was shot in the lab, they were working with this company called Stage 3, which looked at prion diseases in these rats and different animals, seeing the effectiveness of spreading prion disease-based stuff. And Kuru, which is one of the vintage tools of 731, Unit 731 after World War II and Korean War, is now showing up in Ethiopia. Just, again, 5,000-mile flight time machine from the island of Bougainville to now. And it's all that has to be through a test tube. They're leaving tracks all over. They're leaving big muddy footprints, and we got to call them out.
Yeah. Well, George, as citizen journalism has, thanks to you and Team W, everybody involved has really broken the story. I believe that it's going to be citizen diplomacy that's going to help liberate the American people and the rest of the world. So I make an appeal to everybody who's watching this. Let's talk. Let's collaborate on this citizen diplomatic process. Not the diplomatic back channel, but the public open air diplomatic channel.
Here she is, Dr. Hamamoto, our citizen diplomat right here. This is ECAT. And ECAT, say a few words.
I really hate it when George talks about getting hit by a bus like that.
Show the books. Show the books.
Hey, it would be the bus that gets damaged. Huh?
Yeah. Don't I pity that bus. I pity the bus.
I pity the bus. He really is super duper tall.
Yeah.
They are not kidding.
There's
I pity the bus.
Thank you, guys. It really was fun tonight.
Definitely the A-team. Okay.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to see you in a week or so, and I'm going to go put my toes in the sand. We'll see you in a week. And thank you, Kat, for being with us, George Webb, Professor Hamamoto, and everybody else. Good night.
Great. Thank you very much.